President Trump announces a military strike against a drug-carrying boat from Venezuela.
We have a lot of drugs pouring into our country, coming in for a long time. A lot of things are coming out of Venezuela, so we took it out.
The move comes as Trump ramps up his peace through strength approach here and abroad.
I'm Daily Wire Executive Editor John Bickley with Georgia Howe. It's Wednesday, September 3rd, and this is Morning Wire.
Europe's political maps are being redrawn, and the right is holding the pen. We break down how the continent's political landscape is shifting.
We've seen it in Germany, and we're seeing it in Britain. It's incredible. Britain is really in the vanguard of some of the worst kind of Orwellian control of thought and speech.
And Trump reignites the vaccine debate, demanding that Big Pharma release their COVID shot data once and for all.
Thanks for waking up with Morning Wire. Stay tuned. We have the news you need to know.
This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. Typically, I use PrizePicks for combat sports, but with football season arriving, you can bet I'll be cashing in on the action. PrizePicks is the ultimate way to turn your football knowledge into cash this season. With millions of users already on board, the safe and reliable skills-based daily fantasy platform lets you build your lineup in under 60 seconds by selecting more or less on 2 to 6 player projections. Whether you're confident about which players will exceed expectations or which ones might fall short, PrizePicks gives you the opportunity to cash in on your sports expertise. Available in over 40 states, including California, Texas, and Georgia, it's never been easier to enjoy daily fantasy action while watching your favorite games unfold. Download the app today and use code MorningWire to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code MorningWire to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right.
President Trump announced Tuesday that the U.S. took out a boat carrying drugs from Venezuela, the most dramatic move yet in the administration's war on cartels.
Daily Wire senior editor Cabot Phillips has the latest. Cabot. So let's start with what just happened in the Caribbean. What do we know so far?
So President Trump campaigned on a promise to go after the cartels flooding the U.S. with drugs, and he's following through. This week, he deployed at least 8 warships and 2,000 Marines to patrol Pacific and Southern Caribbean waters as part of a, quote, enhanced counter-narcotics operation. And on Tuesday, he announced that one of those ships targeted a drug boat being operated by the cartels.
We just, over the last few minutes, literally shot out a boat, a drug-carrying boat, a lot of drugs in that boat. And you'll be seeing that, and you'll be reading about that. It just happened moments ago, and there's more where that came from.
Remember, this summer, President Trump designated these cartels as terrorist organizations. That allowed the U.S. military to take a more aggressive, offensive approach. So now the question becomes if and how they will respond.
Now, this is part of a pattern of what the Trump administration would say is a more proactive deployment of U.S. military, including in U.S. cities. We've just seen a federal judge rule against that in L.A. What's happening there?
Yeah, on Tuesday, a district judge in San Francisco ruled that President Trump's deployment of the National Guard in L.A. this summer was illegal. Remember, Trump deployed guardsmen this summer to protect federal property from anti-ICE protesters and also aid immigration enforcement across LA. But according to Judge Charles Breyer, that's the brother of former liberal Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer, Trump's deployment was not only unlawful, but importantly, in his view, unnecessary. There was no rebellion, he wrote, nor was civilian law enforcement unable to respond to the protests and enforce the law. And Breyer then went a step further, ruling that in the future, National Guardsmen and other armed services are barred from, quote, engaging in arrests, apprehensions, searches, seizures, security patrols, traffic control, crowd control, riot control, evidence collection, interrogation. The list goes on and on. So
already a long list.
Clearly, yeah, he's trying to prevent Trump from expanding his crime crackdown to cities around the country.
So really a sweeping order there. So what can the president do next? What is the administration's next move?
Well, the order was put on hold for 10 days to allow the Trump administration to file an appeal, which they are certain to do. And there is still a chance the ruling could be overturned by a higher court. That happened just as recently in June when Judge Breyer tried to block Trump's initial deployment of the National Guard to LA. At the time, he said that the widespread riots across the city weren't serious enough to merit federal intervention. He essentially argued that police had the situation under control. But a federal appeals court in that case quickly reversed his ruling, allowing Trump to move forward. So this could be a more short-term victory for the left. And for his part, President Trump on Tuesday again implied that he would move forward with this crime crackdown, and he planned on deploying National Guardsmen to Baltimore and Chicago.
So let's get to another example of the president using military resources to carry out his broader agenda. Tell us about these immigration judges.
Yeah, fascinating move here. So on Tuesday, the Associated Press reported that the Trump administration would be sending up to 600 lawyers from the Defense Department to the Justice Department to serve as temporary immigration judges. Remember, the Biden administration released millions of illegal immigrants into the country, giving them court dates in the future to decide their legal status. But at the moment, the line for a court hearing is more than 3.5 million long. The DOJ requested backup, pushing through that backlog, and the Pentagon is happy to help. This move will potentially double the number of immigration judges overnight. The White House is hoping it'll pave the way for speeding up the deportation process.
Obviously a major priority for the president. Cabot, thanks for reporting.
Absolutely.
Let's be honest, even when we're trying our best, most of us still aren't getting enough fruits, vegetables, and fiber in our diet. That's where Balance of Nature comes in. Their fruit supplement is packed with mango, pineapple, wild blueberries, banana, and more, and it tastes amazing mixed into your morning oatmeal, yogurt, or smoothies. Their veggie supplement has powerhouse ingredients like kale, spinach, broccoli, and even shiitake mushrooms, making it easy to add on salads, soups, and savory dishes. And here's what's really cool. They've got this fiber and spice blend that's the only supplement combining 12 spices with 4 whole fibers. What I appreciate most is how convenient they are. No bags, no mess, no measuring, just clean, quality ingredients I can take anywhere. Plus, everything is vegan, kosher, and gluten-free, and they back it all up with independent third-party lab testing. I can rest easy knowing I'm investing in myself and my health. Head over to balanceofnature.com and use promo code WIRE for 35% off your first order as a preferred customer, plus get a free bottle of that fiber and spice. That's balanceofnature.com, promo code WIRE.
For the first time in modern history, right-wing parties are leading the polls in Europe's 3 largest economies, France, Germany, and the UK.
Here with more is Daily Wire culture reporter Megan Basham. So Megan, let's start with a broad overview. When did this trend emerge, and what are some of the animating issues that are mobilizing people to the right?
I would say that we really began to see the rise of this new muscular European right with the election of Italy's Giorgia Meloni back in 2022. And there's really a number of issues driving this, from inflation to a breakdown of trust in governmental institutions during the COVID era. But I spoke to the editor-in-chief of the European Conservative, Albino Mario Fantini, and he told me that there is really one issue that rises head and shoulders above all the others.
Immigration is the number one factor driving all of these movements, all of these parties, and a lot of these protests that you've been seeing since July or even earlier. And that's just going to grow.
Now, to his point, official government data shows around 25 to 30 million immigrants entering Europe since 2015, primarily coming from countries like Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq. But other estimates put those numbers much higher, and it's really set up this culture clash that's been exacerbated by the sense of public money going to house and care for immigrants above the needs of citizens.
I think people are suffering. Now, if they didn't see newcomers getting free handouts, free housing, stipends, and not having to work, I think it'd be different.
And essentially, you're seeing the same dynamic in Germany and France.
So what do the numbers look like in terms of political movement towards these nationalist parties?
Well, in Great Britain, largely on the strength of that immigration issue, Nigel Farage's Reform UK party has really overtaken Labour and the Tories in polling. So recent municipal elections saw the Reform UK receiving the most votes of any party. And then if we turn to France, National Rally is not only the most popular among voters, it's also now the largest party in the lower house of parliament. In Germany, we're seeing the same thing. Alternative for Germany, which was seen as a fringe party only a few years ago, is now topping the polls with voters.
Now, how are the establishment parties responding?
Well, the next elections aren't until 2027 and 2029. But in the meantime, what we're seeing is these establishment parties making use of what many say were the same tactics used to suppress the MAGA movement in the United States. So after she began to surge in the polls, Marine Le Pen, leader of the National Rally Party in France, was hit with charges of misuse of EU funds. And the result of those was a ruling to keep her out of elections for the next 5 years. In Germany in 2023, AfD received 0 invitations to appear on state TV. And after AfD had a very successful election in 2024 anyway, we saw Germany's intelligence agency classify them as an extremist party, an extremist group. Fantini told me that he thinks these suppression efforts are going to create a backlash.
I think societies, countries here, political parties are going to move further and further to the right. I also think there's going to be more and more protests and manifestations and riots in some cases. Of course, all of this is going to be used by those in power to justify clamping down even more, because the discourse you're already seeing in some places is, oh my gosh, the extreme right is growing. It's a threat to democratic stability. We need to do something.
And then we just saw an example of this in the UK when British comedian Graham Linehan was arrested for posting 3 comments to X that were critical of the transgender movement. In response to that, J.K. Rowling posted, "What has the UK become? This is totalitarianism, utterly deplorable."
Well, I think she's become kind of an avatar for a lot of Brits these days. Megan, thanks for reporting.
Yes, my pleasure.
The FDA has removed emergency use authorization for COVID vaccines, and President Trump has targeted big pharma companies for more transparency over the shots.
Here are the details. Is Daily Wire reporter Amanda Presa-Giacomo. Hey, Amanda. So some significant changes here from the FDA regarding the COVID vaccines. Tell us what they just did here.
Yeah, so the FDA has removed what's called emergency use authorization. During the pandemic, that rule was implemented so people could get the vaccine without having to first get approval from a doctor. It made the shots very widely accessible. Currently, folks who are considered high risk, that includes anyone over the age of 65 or anyone with an underlying medical condition, they'll still have that same accessibility. They won't have to go to their doctor first for a prescription. Now, healthy people, on the other hand, they can get the shot if they want, but they will have to have it recommended by a physician first. Here's FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty Makary on that.
The government's not going to stand in the way of somebody who wants to get a vaccine. And especially with the COVID vaccines, we've made it very clear if your doctor believes you need it, then you can get it. Now, the FDA has authorized a new round of COVID vaccines with the updated strain for high-risk individuals. We don't have data in healthy Americans, so we're not recommending it for healthy Americans.
Makary also noted that by ending this emergency rule, it makes vaccine mandates legally impossible.
We saw the heavy hand of government with the vaccine mandates with the COVID vaccine. No longer is that possible given the new landscape that we've created.
Now, the criticism we are hearing from legacy media and some medical groups is that this change is going to decrease overall COVID vaccinations. It could also affect insurance coverage. That's not a total certainty, but some people could be paying around $150 or more for a COVID shot if they aren't high risk.
Now, we also have President Trump weighing in on the COVID vaccines and Pfizer's handling of data. What did he recently say?
Yeah, Trump really took it to big pharma companies over these vaccines. He posted on Truth Social that he wants these companies to justify the success of these drugs to the public. I'm going to read some of this post from Trump. Many people think the drugs are a miracle that saved millions of lives. Others disagree. With the CDC being ripped apart over this question, I want the answer and I want it now. I have been shown information from Pfizer and others that is extraordinary, but they never seem to show those results to the public. Why not? Also very interesting from that post, Trump, for the first time ever, seems to question Operation Warp Speed. That got us these COVID vaccines very quickly. He wrote, quote, "I hope Operation Warp Speed was as brilliant as many say it was. If not, we all want to know about it and why."
Now, Trump mentioned some drama at the CDC in that post. Fill us in on what exactly he's talking about there.
Yeah, just last week, HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. fired CDC Director Susan Menarez for apparently not being on board with the Trump administration's agenda. She's currently in a legal fight over that firing, by the way. Now, in the wake of that ouster, several top CDC officials resigned. Vaccine policies and shakeups seem to be linked to most, if not all, of those departures. There was also a New York Times op-ed from 9 former directors of the CDC condemning Kennedy and claiming that he's endangering every American's health. Now, there was a very poignant response to that from NIH Director Jay Bhattacharya. He pointed out on Tuesday that at least 2 of those authors were in charge of the CDC when it embraced politicized school closures and COVID vaccine mandates. He added that the people criticizing Secretary Kennedy for his efforts to restore gold standard science is actually what harms public health.
Well, as we documented here, there's been a lot of public support behind really shaking things up at the CDC. So Kennedy probably feels he's got a mandate of sorts to do this. Amanda, thanks so much for reporting.
You're welcome.
Thanks for waking up with us. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. We'll be back later this evening with more news you need to know.